Hello and welcome to Knife Delights, and welcome to part 8 of my buck knife collection. And these are my USA made buck slip joints. And I want to start off with a caveat, and I'll probably put a note down in the description or pin a comment. This is probably one of the more difficult videos to make because a lot of these knives are no longer in production. And so it's hard to find accurate information, such as what the blade steel that was being used at the time. Couple that with the fact that a lot of these original slip joints were made by Camillus, and Camillus, they used a lot of 440A steel, but they used other steels. So the exact steel, I think the only way to find out for sure would be to send it in and have it tested, So the other thing is you can't find specs on them. So I tried to measure the blades the same way that Buck seems to measure their blades when they have it in their current catalogs or on their current website. So some of them, the blade measurements might be off slightly, but I think overall it gives you a good picture of, like the blade lengths, what the blade steel might have been. Same thing with the weight. Some of them, the blades were sharpened way down, so obviously that's going to affect very slightly the actual weight of what the knives would have been brand new. So again, some of this is kind of ballparkish. It should be very, very close. I've tried to do as much research as I could to make sure I'm giving you accurate information, but please understand that sometimes the information's lacking, and it's kind of a best guess based on a compilation of a whole lot of information. So we're going to get started here. We're going to start out with a Buck 301. We'll try to go in numerical order. So I have two of the Buck 301s. There's this one right here, and they got the rosewood covers and has the blue inlay there. It says Buck and has the anvil on it. So these are very nice knives. This is a very classic, almost like gentleman's version of the Buck knife. And these knives with these covers kind of evolved out of the Chairman series. And I actually do have a Chairman series knife here I'll be getting to here in just a moment. Again, for any new viewers, Buck did do some innovations on their Stockmans. Now, there may be some other companies that have some models with 3 springs, but Buck is the only company I know that consistently uses 3 springs on their Stockmans. And they also reversed the order of the sheep's foot so that the sheep's foot folds out the opposite end of the main blade. And that puts that sandwiched right in the middle between those 2 good heavy springs. It makes for very stout cutting. Also, by having the 3rd spring, you can see it comes out straight. It's at a 90-degree angle here. On a normal Stockman, since they only have 2 springs, they actually have to bend the blade a little bit and cant it over. So if you're trying to score something, well, you have to kind of adjust for that cant in the sheep's foot blade. So anyway, there's that one, and then here's the more traditional, and Buck uses Velox here, and the traditional logo there. So this is the Buck 301 Stockman. Next in line now is the Buck 302, and this is the Solitaire. And looking in an old catalog, it lists the inlays here as cherry wood. So this is a cherry wood scale. Of course, Solitaire, as it implies, is a single-bladed knife. And if you watch one of my previous parts, I went over the imported made Buck slip joints, and you'll see a lot of these models that are no longer made in the US, but they're having them made in China instead. So they do have a buck solo. I don't remember what that number is, but that's the Chinese version basically of this knife. Now this is an actual chairman's knife. And the reason it's a chairman's knife is because it has the signature, or inscription of the signature of Chuck Buck. And Chuck was the grandson of founder Hoyt Buck. And they came out with this chairman series. And I believe, like the 301, the 303, and some other models, they came out with the chairman series. So this is an actual chairman series knife. The Buck 301 Solitaire. What a great little knife. We'll now move on to the Buck 303, the Buck Cadet, which is another Stockman, only it's a little smaller than the 301. This is like more of a medium size. The 301 is the full size. So this is a medium size Stockman. And again, I've got a version of it here in the rosewood. And same blades, same manufacturer and everything as the 301. But just as you can see, just a little smaller Stockman. A lot of people prefer the 303 because, it doesn't weigh so much and fits in the pocket just a little better. So I have one of each, one in the rosewood and one in the Velox here. Try to get that to focus a little better. There we go. I guess I should just go ahead and expand all the blades out here so you have a good look. So it's pretty much all the same, blade shapes as the 301, just a little smaller. So that is the Buck 303. And again, the 301 and 303 are still in production here in the U.S. So it's good to see that they've retained some of their models here with U.S. manufacturing. So anyway, that's the Buck 303 Cadet. The Buck 305 Lancer, Buck describes as a premier penknife. And it is different than a typical penknife. It is under 2 5/8 inches, or right at 2 5/8 inches, under 3 inches, which is kind of the criteria for a penknife. Most penknives have 2 pen blades to them. But what makes it a penknife is it's under 3 inches and it's 2-bladed, and the blades fold out from opposite ends. So that's what makes this a penknife. But as I said, Buck did a little different here, as they used a clip point blade as the main blade, and then they have a coping blade on it. This is an early version. I just did a video on the 305 Lancer comparing these two different versions if you want to get more detail on it. But one way of identifying this as Camillus made is this very long nail neck here. So, and then we have this Lancer here, which was actually manufactured by Buck themselves, but as you can see, has a different shield to it. This has the traditional shield, and then Buck sometime in the 80s for a few years just used that Buck shield, and then they've went back to using the traditional shield. And as you can see, Buck always used these like half moon nail nicks on it. So there's 2 of the Buck 305 Lancers. Again, check out my video on the Lancer where I do a full comparison and dig into the history just a little bit more on them. Well, this large Stockman up here, it's quite, oops, sorry, wrong knife. Got this large Stockman right here, jumbo Stockman if you will. And this is the Buck 307 Wrangler, and they no longer make this. Again, I believe this to be a Camillus made because, you know, Camillus under contract by Buck because of that long nail nick there. But this is such an impressive stockman knife. You put this in your hand, and I always say it almost tells you, like, you know, let's go to work. This is a big, heavy-duty knife. What a great knife. It's a shame they don't make them anymore. So it's basically the same blades and everything as the 301 and 303. It's just a bigger version of it. So let me, why don't I just go ahead and pull one out of each, and maybe we can do a little comparison here so you can see. So that's the 301. And this one would be the 303. Let's see, let me move that out of the way here. Let me move a couple things out of the way here. Get a better shot of this. There you have it. That's a pretty good comparison there. So the medium, regular size, and jumbo stockman. Again, the Buck 307. Well, hopefully I've got everything back into frame here again, and we'll move along to the 309 Companion. Now, it's a kind of like a pen knife, but it's a little bit too long and too large to be considered a true pen knife. But it's a two-bladed knife where the blades rotate out opposite ends. And unlike the 305 Lancer, you can see the difference in size there. But the Companion has a clip point blade and a pen blade to it. Just a handy knife. And yeah, again, this one was made in the U.S., made by Buck, I believe, because of that, again, that half moon on there. This is from, this one's from 1995. So, yeah, I believe Buck manufactured this one in-house. So just a very nice little fifth pocket knife, kind of like the Lancer. The Buck 309 Companion. Let's take a look at the Buck 311. Now, I've always heard this referred to as the Slimline Trapper, but in all the catalogs, it's just listed as a Trapper. And Buck made two other Trapper models. One was a small Trapper and then another Trapper. But it was never officially named the Slimline Trapper that I can find. But this is their trapping knife. And as you can see, this one was well used. This was an eBay find. And somebody got a lot of use out of this. So, one of the Buck Trapper models. That was the clip blade. And here is the spade blade. So, the model 311 Trapper, sometimes referred to as the Slimline Trapper. We can now go to the 313. The 313, this is a Buck Muskrat. And Buck was different on how they made their muskrats. Typically, a muskrat has two clip point blades, kind of the long, slender clip point. I think they kind of refer to that as a California clip, where it's a big, long, sloping clip blade. But Buck used a spade blade for their second blade. So it is different than most trappers. I'm sorry, most muskrats. Now, I did find some pretty specific information on this one here. This appears to be the third version of the trapper knife, and the reason is you see the little cutout there for access to the nail nick. It's got it on this side, and it has it on this side also. The first two versions of this knife did not have that in there. You'll also note, and at the beginning of the video, I talked about dating buck knives and some of the issues you run into. So I was able, again, to find some very specific information on the muskrat. And you'll see there is no date symbol next to the model number. So they started their date symbols in 1986, so you would think that this was prior to 1986. Now, the information that I read was they stopped producing these in 1985, which would make sense because there would be no date stamp on it, but they sold them up into the 90s. So it leads you to believe that in 85 they stopped stamping out the blades and everything, and they had such a stock of them that they were able to keep them in their catalog and selling them into the 90s. This is new old stock, so I have the box for this one, and it is dated, I think, 1994 on the box. So it makes sense it would be one of the later versions of it too. So I'm going to try to do another video perhaps on dating buck knives and dating knives in general, because these are the kinds of issues that you run into. But anyway, this is the Buck Muskrat Model 313. The last knife I have in the 300 series is this 321, and this is a bird knife. And it's a bird knife because it has this hook here. And to keep it family friendly, this was poked up inside to the bird, and you twist the hook around a little bit, and then you could pull the entrails out. So you can just imagine, where this went. So there were other companies that made bird knives also. This was Buck's version. So I guess if you're out hunting quail and other small birds like that, you had this to get the entrails out of it, and then you had, again, this really long sloping clip blade here to finish dressing out the bird. So this is a used one I got off of eBay. Still in pretty good shape though. So that is the 321 bird knife. Starting in 1979, Buck came out with these fancy slip joints here. And this is the Buck Colt Model 703. Now, eventually, there ended up being, I think, a total of 5 in the 700 series of knives. So the 703 is kind of like a medium-sized Stockman, a fancy version of it. And this is just, it's a fancy looking Stockman is what it is. There you go. Very nice, very sharp looking, and got these slanted bolsters. I think that was balsa wood. I've got it in the picture there. But then it had the plain Buck, just B-U-C-K in there for the inlay there. And again, this is a new old stock. This is a 1994 model here. So it's just a very sharp looking knife. It's too bad they stopped making these too. It's a very nice looking knife. That is the Buck Colt 703. The only other knife I have in the 700 series is the Yearling, and this is model 709. And again, this one was made in 1992, and it is a two-bladed knife. Just like that. So you see it kind of mimics, kind of like the companion here, only it's just a fancy looking one. And these are really sharp looking. Again, this is a a new old stock here. I do have the box and everything for it. But just a sharp little pocket knife here. It's amazing the knives they used to offer. It's a shame that they just don't offer them anymore. The 700 series went away, but you know, they kept making a lot of the 300 series. So I guess they just didn't sell well enough. But there it is, the 709 Yearling. Now, when I talk about filling in gaps in my buck collection here in 2023, that's what I'm talking about. I need to try to get that 700 series filled out. Well, I certainly hope you've enjoyed this video here on my USA-made slip joint knives. It's a lot of fun to do these videos. It took a lot of research, and again, I hope I'm giving you accurate information. To the best of my knowledge, you're getting some good stuff here. So anyway, until next time, have a very delightful day.